Shalom and welcome to NeshamaCast, exploring Jewish spiritual care today, brought to you by Neshama, Association of Jewish Chaplains. I'm your host, Rabbi Ed Bernstein. As NeshamaCast has grown in listeners, so too our NeshamaCast team is growing. You've met Rabbi Katya Philo, who has been a valued contributor, and now I'm pleased to introduce an additional member of our NeshamaCast team, Chaplain David Balto, who will be contributing as a presenter and an interviewer to NeshamaCast. So, to Chaplain David Balto, I wish you a warm welcome to NeshamaCast.
And thank you so much for letting me join the team, Ed. I feel like I've just joined the Kansas City Chiefs.
Wow, well, that's quite a compliment, especially since my daughter, who is a Swiftie, suddenly became a Kansas City Chiefs fan last year. So we have the Chiefs going in our house all the time. But I must say, David, you have been among our most enthusiastic listeners to NeshamaCast, so I want to thank you for all of your enthusiastic support along the way, and it's a special treat to be able to go on this journey with you going forward. So I want to treat you today like many of our previous guests and future guests. NeshamaCast is an opportunity for members of NAJC, Neshama Association of Jewish Chaplains, to get to know our members and for the general public to see the human side of the chaplains of their communities. So I'd like to start with your spiritual origin story. Where are you from, and how did your early exposure to Jewish tradition shape your path going forward?
Well, it's 5 degrees outside here in Washington, D.C., and my beloved Ed.D, who was the shamus of his shul for 40 years, began every morning to going to his shul and stoking up the heat and making sure there was a minyan. And I think my Ed.D is my guide in providing spiritual care. I was blessed with grandparents for whom doing acts of Gemilut Chasadim were the core of their lives, and I hope I am following in their footsteps.
And you trace your origins to the Twin Cities, to Minneapolis, speaking of cold weather?
Yes, exactly. Yes, thank you. So he would be getting up sometimes when it was well below zero. Thank you.
Yeah. So tell me about, in addition to your grandparents, their influence on you, did you go to synagogue growing up? What was Jewish life like for you?
Minneapolis has an unusually vibrant Jewish community, and I was really blessed by growing up there and being part of a vibrant conservative synagogue, which was made famous one day in a movie called The Serious Man. You know, it was just a very active Jewish community, and I had a very good Jewish upbringing, clearly inspired by my Bubby and Sadie and the very frum life that they led.
So your route to professional chaplaincy was somewhat circuitous. You are an attorney by training, and you are recognized as a leading expert in antitrust law. I've even seen you from time to time on cable news, such as on the CNBC Squawk Box. So I'm wondering if you could describe the arc of your legal career and what drew you to antitrust law.
Antitrust involves a unique combination of economics and policy and takes you away from the normal type of law, which involves an incredible amount of statutory interpretation. And because I had an inclination towards economics and policy, that's why I found antitrust law attractive.
So tell us how you then pivoted to chaplaincy.
Since I started chaplaincy 10 years ago, that's where my heart and mind has been. And and I'm very proud of that. After the death of my father, I was really struck by the fact that I found deep meaning in being able to be present for people who were in pain and listening to their stories. I realized it really meant a lot to me, and I think to them, for me to be a compassionate presence listening. And I asked a rabbi friend of mine, and he said, "Why don't you think about going to the Hebrew Home of Greater Washington? that sounded attractive. I always did a lot of volunteer work with older people. And I studied there under Rabbi Jim Michaels of blessed memory. And I was very fortunate to do that. And working in a skilled nursing facility is just a wondrous opportunity because people in that situation towards the end of life have so much to teach us.
So you provide chaplaincy services in a skilled nursing facility, and you're also in the hospital world as well. Can you describe that?
Yes, I was fortunate enough to work in an inner city hospital for about 5 or 6 years. I still do hospital work, and that was in the hospital, which was the level 1 trauma unit for the District of Columbia. So the work was really remarkably challenging. One thing I'm proud of in that work was my patients were basically a lower income African American, and I realized I didn't know a lot about their religion. So I decided to go to a vacation Bible camp, an African American Bible camp for senior citizens. And I did that for three straight years. And it was a remarkable spiritual experience that really expanded my faith.
I've gotten to know you as a dear friend and colleague in NAJC, and I got to learn that a project you're very passionate about is the Bikur Cholim conference. And as we're recording, the conference has started, but I want to give you the opportunity to talk about the conference in general, how it came to be and what it's accomplished over the years. Then we'll get into this year's current conference that's taking place now. How did you come to the Bikur Cholim conference?
Sure. The National Center for Jewish Healing, which unfortunately no longer exists, was a remarkable institution that provided scholarship and dialogue, a clearinghouse of information. It really fostered understanding and thought, creative thought about Jewish healing. One of the things it did was run an annual conference known as the National Bikur Cholim Conference. When the center closed and COVID hit, I asked the Jewish board if I could take it over. And they said yes. That was 5 years ago. And each year we've held a program every other Monday during the winter on topics of Bikur Cholim. The first year was just how do we do this under the restrictions of COVID? The second year was how do we find resilience after what we've gone through after a year of COVID? The third year was loss and just dealing with the broad subject of loss and how we understand it and how we help people on the path to healing when they've suffered loss. Last year's subject was broadening our tents and strengthening our communities, which was really wonderful. We thought it addressed all these topics that nobody ever likes to talk about, like suicide, alcoholism, addiction, loneliness. It was just a really great program. This year, because of our understanding of the increasing nature of crises that are going on, and the dramatic and unfortunate increase in anti-Semitism, we decided to focus on crisis, trauma, and anti-Semitism, and how we go about finding paths to healing facing those problems. Of course, with the terrible tragedy in Los Angeles, this is incredibly current, but our goal is to help us all examine how we respond to these crises, how we care for those who have been affected, and also care for ourselves.
We have a number of treasured colleagues from Neshama Association of Jewish Chaplains who are participating in this year's NAJC conference, as is often the case. And so I'm wondering if you can talk about the NAJC colleagues who are participating this year.
NAJC members are a core of our faculty each year. This year, the kickoff panel was led by our interim president, Rabbi Lynn Liberman. And then next week, Hagar Ben Eliezer from UC Berkeley is going to speak on anti-Semitism, and she's dealt very directly with those problems in assisting students.
She's been on NeshamaCast. I invite listeners to queue up the Chaplains on Campus episode in our NeshamaCast feed.
Right. Then we're going to deal with the issue of disasters and crises first from a social worker's perspective and then from a chaplain's perspective. For the chaplain's perspective, we have Rabbi Shira Stern and Rabbi Ziona Zalazo. By the way, Rabbi Shira is in Los Angeles now, helping to provide spiritual care to those who are affected by the fires.
She is also an alumna of NeshamaCast, so shout out to her episode as well.
And then at the end, we're doing two interesting panels on self-care. The first one is with Alden Solovey, who is really the leading liturgist in our generation on prayer and trauma. And then the last panel is Rabbi Sarah Adler from the University of Michigan and Rabbi Deborah Schloss from the VA hospital, who are going to talk about using art and poetry, using the other side of our brain to help us find resilience in the face of crisis and trauma.
Now, by the time our conversation is released into the podcastosphere, if that's a word, most of the Bikur Cholim conference sessions will have already happened live. Are they accessible by recording for those listeners tuning into this podcast who then say, oh, let me check out Bikur Cholim? What would one do?
Yes, so they're on our website and they're recorded, and all the materials are prepared are also on our website. By the way, we pride ourselves at trying to create a clearinghouse of materials on topics of Jewish healing on our website. So take the time to look through what we have, and it may help provide you assistance as you help some of the people you deal with.
And I'll put the website in our show notes in the NeshamaCast feed. But what is the website people can go to learn more about the Bikur Cholim conference?
Sure, it's jewish-healing-center.org.
Okay, so I'll put that in the show notes so people can check out this valuable material. So, David, you are joining the NeshamaCast cinematic universe, as it were. What are you looking forward to in contributing to NeshamaCast?
You know, I think we aren't anywhere near as aware as we should be of the wonderful stories that all of us have to tell about our work. And we have so much to learn from each other. And, so typically when we think about learning, we think about turning to a PowerPoint and going and having citations and things like that. But the human story that each of us has to tell can be so informative. I really love the first questions you ask about everybody's spiritual journeys, because it makes me wonder about my own journey and what was really important there, and helps me understand that journey better. So that's the wonder of NeshamaCast.
And I'm excited that you're coming on board to help bring out the stories of more of our colleagues. So as we conclude your introduction to the NeshamaCast world, you had mentioned our colleague Rabbi Lynn Liberman, who contributed to the first session of the Bikur Cholim conference, and that was in the immediate aftermath of the first major cycle of fires in Los Angeles in early January 2025. And we're going to air Rabbi Liberman's contribution to that session. Is there anything else you want to say in introduction to our colleague Rabbi Liberman's presentation that we're about to hear?
So I have this really strange habit. I try to attend most of the committee meetings of NAJC, probably wanting to be all of the different types of chaplains there are. But the committee meetings that really have always been run in an incredible fashion are the ones that Lynn Liberman and Judy Coomer run for the community chaplains. And they really have a wonderful way of identifying the central issues that we struggle with and coming up with creative ways of building discussions. And I think you see that in Lynn's presentation here. She, touches on some really core issues about how we provide spiritual care in tremendously adverse circumstances. And you can hear that it's based on a world of learning that she's developed being a community chaplain in several really difficult positions, including being a volunteer police and fire chaplain. So it's a really wonderful presentation to listen to.
Okay, so Chaplain David Balto, once again, welcome to NeshamaCast. Thank you for having this introductory conversation. We look forward to your future contributions to NeshamaCast. And now I invite our listeners to stay right here to hear a presentation by Rabbi Lynn Liberman at the Bikur Cholim Conference 2025.
So with that, let me turn things over to Rabbi Lieberman on the approach of the chaplains.
Thank you, David. It's a pleasure to be here. I just have to own something. My mom is on this call. I'm grateful that she's here, and she is the Lieberman in my family who married a Liberman. So my last name is actually Liberman, in case you all are wondering. My mom will call me about it later. I'm really honored to be representing NAJC, Neshama Association of Jewish Chaplains. Thrilled to be here in an interim capacity as one of our co-interim presidents in the intervening time that our actual president is off on family leave. So it's a pleasure to be here for that. Just changing something here. Okay. Just so you have a little bit more information behind me for where I'm going to go for the next few minutes. It's grateful to hear what Reuven said, really enlightening, and I appreciate those insights. I work inside of an agency, and I work in a bunch of other places so that you can see the scope of where I might be speaking from. I work inside of the Jewish Family Service of St. Paul. I'm the community chaplain here in the Twin Cities. So watching the kind of communal response sometimes to things that are happening, I can see that a little bit and feel illuminated by the larger scope of what Reuven was telling us about. But I also am a chaplain, and the joke in my world is I have to sometimes look down and see which name tag am I wearing, because one day I might be working at my community chaplaincy position, but today I actually went through 2 other name tags. I'm also a hospice chaplain, and I'm a hospital acute care chaplain, and I do some work in those environments as well. So that also keeps me busy, along with police, fire, chaplaincy as well, and a bunch of other things. The reason it's interesting to raise all this is that they all bring a picture of the needs that are evident in the world that we are seeing, and where might spiritual care be provided. So the first thing I actually want to do is to ask you to join me for a moment and to just participate, if you will, by starting with ourselves. So very easy. And this is a tool you can take with you. I invite you to just take a deep breath. You could take it in through your mouth and let it out with your nose. I invite you to do it one more time, actually. Another deep breath in. And again out through your nose. Chaplains know that, and I've got colleagues on this conversation, so I'm always interested to hear if they have something to add as well. We know we have to ready ourselves before we can commence to care for whomever it is that or whatever it is we're about to step into. This is a tool that you now have, if you didn't know this before. And I just invite you to take this with you. We do this exercise in another piece of work that I do, which is to work with first responders to help them be able to continue to work in the world of first responding, which ramps up, right? And we need to bring down. 2 deep breaths actually is an incredible response for calming. It restores our CO2 levels. It slows your heart rate down. I don't know if people were experiencing that. You can feel calmer after it, less tense, more focused. And here's the really good thing. In a way, and we say this to the first responders that I work with, when we offer this to ourselves, it's better than a pill. It lasts a good length of time, 1 to 2 hours, how deep you can pull in those breaths. And it can change your demeanor. And that's what we need to do in the moment when we feel we're facing something that is really big. Keep breathing. One of the things that I'm always sensitive to with all of the work that I'm doing is language. And so one other aspect that I wanted to share right up front is a reflection on the power of words. And that includes even how we respond to things that are happening around us. I am I don't practice the art at the moment, but I actually went through training as an emergency medical technician, extremely insightful. Certain lessons just get into your head and you remember, and it's not just about the bandages and the equipment that you take, but an instructor who said to me, we never run to a moment of care, and no moment is a crisis. Running and the word crisis elevates us. Do we need to be expeditious? For sure. So we want to be cognizant of something that feels out of place, unusual, something we don't really want to have happening? Absolutely. But start with ourselves. Come in ready to offer what we have to offer. It might be big, but we're there to make a difference. I don't only know this from my teachings, from all this training that I've had, but I do know this from our Jewish roots. And so it would just be amiss to not pause and linger for a few moments in just one of a multitude of places that we could find a source of strength, courage, and possibility for caring for ourselves. And some of these words, especially, I think I'm facing many people who are in the social work field, and I know I'm looking at little squares of faces with chaplains and colleagues. So some of these things are just going to be things, oh, yes, I know that. But even as today, I went and hurriedly took care of a hospice patient of mine, and who was trained, a new hospice patient who herself was trained as a social worker. And she goes like, oh, yeah, I forgot those things are important to do. Right? So in the moment of care, where do we go to go back to those things that give us our source of strength? And for the moment, I chose to go into the Psalms. I use Psalms constantly. Those of us who have a little bit of familiarity to a great deal of familiarity with our prayer book encounter verses and passages from the Psalms on a regular basis. Sometimes this a single verse out of a powerful length of Psalm, but the verse is something that stays with us. There's a series of Psalms, in fact, that were collected by Reb Nachman of Wroclaw quite a few years ago. He identified them based on a Talmudic passage several hundred years ago that have a particular, when you put them together, source of healing and the power of wellness. I'm not going to go through it all because that would take up all of our time, and there are many other things to talk about. So I'm going to just kind of dwell on one. But these 10 Psalms, there was a book actually put together David will probably tell you the title of the Psalms, the book. And they include some that you know and some maybe that you haven't encountered before. And the one I want to share is Psalm 90. So as I go through my day, depending on where I'm going, Psalm 90 provides the opportunity when I'm working, especially one-on-one with a patient, to help them identify in words that maybe they didn't have what it is that they might be experiencing, to take something that feels just outside of their grasp and their capacity to feel grounded because of a new diagnosis, because of a new tremendous challenge that has been put before them, and somehow realize that they are in this human history. So, for example, in Psalm 90, and I'm not even going to do the whole thing, to share a few thoughts. Tfilah Moshe Isha Elohim Adonai Ma'on Ata Hayita Lanu Bedor. Right? You, God, you have been our refuge in every generation. When one is feeling especially lost, where do I want to go? Something that has given me the strength and those before me the strength and presence to continue forward. Right? We've sought refuge before, and we have found it before in God's presence. Another verse, Baterem Harim, Yaldu v'tohalel, Eretz v'tavel, right? I'm just shortening it. Before the mountains came into being, before you brought forth the earth and the world, from eternity to eternity, you are our God. Again, grounding ourselves in that space of humanity facing problems, that it's nothing particularly new, except to the individual in that moment with whom I'm standing, trying to help them find that internal source and resource of support and care and well-being. There are many passages that are available to us, and this is just by, again, a small taste. We don't know who the individual was or what their circumstance was when these were written. There are many people who surmise about this, and I have the great pleasure of teaching now I'm in my 4th year of doing this, of working through with some people that are members of the congregation that I attend, the Book of Psalms. And we're discovering that there's something very powerful about being connected to voices that are around us, that are still present to us. Voices we don't know their disposition, but we can find a way to express what is the space that we are in the moment. I'm going to take a little shift, because with the strength of the words of the psalmists behind me, I spent a lot of time out in the world, both on one-on-one work with people in hospital rooms, but also in senior living situations in my community, chaplaincy, people who have been lost and forgotten. It's a very big area of what I and my other community chaplains attend to, which are folks that don't find their way into our typical communal spaces and places. They don't belong to congregations. They don't go to a JCC. And yet, when they meet up with a moment that's challenging, that piece of them calls out. And we are able, when I say we, chaplains, community chaplains, are able to show up. One of the things, just by example, and to give over to you some of these opportunities of care. Before Hanukkah, as I do each year, I bring a Hanukkah celebration to many of the folks that are really cut off from the larger Jewish community. They can't go to a shul if they wanted to, or they don't belong to a shul, or otherwise, maybe they don't have any family where they are. So I bring celebrations to them. And it was during Hanukkah, so this is not that long ago, given how our calendar has played itself out this year, that the conversation of, and I couldn't tell you how often this came up in the midst of my presentation, when somebody would say, as I always invite questions, how are we going to get through this? How am I going to make sense? Not Hanukkah, but the world. How am I going to make sense to go forward? And I invited people to do something with me. They were all of the people who attended, and I had tens of people and did about 14 of these in these large groups. I did the same thing with every group. I said, go with me. I want to invite you to do something now, which is to turn to your neighbor, smile at them, say hello, share your name. And as I stood up front and I watched people after people, group after group do this, I want you to know, and I can actually imagine it here if we all were our faces on the screen and not just our names, that the mood of the room lifted up, literally. To see people smile, to look at their eyes transform into vast wells of life, and to see people share those moments together, the profound effect of a person connecting with another was deeply felt. Without exception, people said to me afterwards, everything else you did was great, chaplain, was okay, rabbi, but connecting with my neighbor was the most important thing. Thank you. I think one woman said, I need to go down the hallway now and make sure to say hello to every person that I meet, just to say hello. And I invited them, and I invite you to just connect. I am part of a team at my JFS that we meet to do supervision, and sometimes we share colleague stories, client stories, to help us kind of unpack what we can do better in our service to those with whom we're working. And my supervisor told us a story just last week, actually, that just really deeply struck me. We have known, because he has mentioned it before seeking support, that he has had a very challenging client over the years, somebody he is diametrically opposed with on every single issue you can imagine, from politics to art to food, but that he's been a therapy client to my supervisor. And my supervisor said, okay, I finally have to admit, I actually really like this guy. I don't agree with him on everything, but I really like this guy, which led us into the conversation about being in relationship. I share that with you as well. Our battle is against loneliness. Our challenge is to alleviate the stress and distress, not of just these large issues that are prevailing that have been mentioned, but just beginning with the one-to-one. Because we're not all sitting in a public office. We're not all vested with all those resources that we might be able to, for example, make donations or to show up. But we can make a difference, echad l'sheni, one to another, with each other. Take care of yourself. Just a few more thoughts. If we say in the world of being chaplains, of providing spiritual care, that we show up for the other, we have to remember to show up for ourselves. And that's okay. I can't invite you and encourage you enough to remember to do that. And some of these things we've heard about, and especially since last year, so I guess now we can technically say 2 years ago, since October 7th occurred, right? And the news that is erupted and erupting and going to keep going on around us, it bears repeating. Go on a news fast, right? Don't listen to a 24-hour news cycle. Get a little bit if you need it, or leave it until the weekend and read a weekend newspaper if you still get one of those. Exercise more, drink more water, try to sleep more, all those good things to take care of our well-being. Writing, I can't encourage that enough. And I always like to, when I share this, to encourage people by saying you do not need to be a writer. Just put the pen or the pencil or the fingers on the keyboard, the pen or the pencil on the paper, and let it out. It changes your neural pathways. If you're a writer, you might know that. If you haven't tried it, give it a whirl and see what happens. If you're a little apprehensive, here's a great technique. I brought this to our chaplains a couple of years ago at a conference, and some people have come back to me and asked about it. And I meant to grab an example and I forgot. If you have a 3x5 card, it's called word art. Very easy. Put a word in the middle of it, take some other colorful things that you might have, magic markers, crayons, and just color. One word. Change the word each time. Do a word a day. Let yourself express what's inside. Stones. These are stones that I keep in my pocket. This one says strength on it. This one I got in Israel last year via Sem Lecha Shalom, if you can see it. Or simply one that feels really good and it just sits in my pocket when I need to have a touchstone, a moment to recognize and be grounding myself again. A couple other really fast reflections so that we can hear our last presenter, and then we'll have time for questions. Listen to all the options of where we can learn from. And I love teachers. My mom was a teacher, and I've been blessed to also teach. And not only the adults who teach the children, but the children have a lot of wisdom to tell us too, how to get through it. So I'll share 3 thoughts, and then I'll give you a closing thought in the moment. The first is be mindful, pause and reflect, take a moment to just be. A second one from a group of teens, anchor your day, be solid, remember to stick around and to stay anchored to that which matters. And the last one from the young people, take a breath, breathe, keep breathing. It says in Psalm 104, V'tishlach rucha yivareum v'techadesh pnei adama. As God did at creation, the psalmist declares, send back your breath as they are created and you renew the face of the earth. I often like to think of actually Dory, the fish, who she said, just keep swimming. I say, just keep breathing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Liberman.
NeshamaCast is a production of Neshama, Association of Jewish Chaplains. Thank you to Chaplain David Balto for joining the NeshamaCast team and for sharing a piece of the 2025 Bikur Cholim Conference with the NeshamaCast audience. And thank you to our colleague Rabbi Lynn Liberman, NAJC Acting Co-President, for her words of wisdom on managing challenging times. Please consider making a contribution to NAJC to support NeshamaCast and all of the vital work that NAJC does to promote Jewish spiritual care. Click on the link in the show notes to donate. Thank you to Rabbi Katya Philo for technical support and production assistance. Additional thanks for logistical support to Allison Atterbury, NAJC Executive Director, and Rabbi Drew Kaplan and the NAJC Social Media Committee. Transcripts for this episode and other episodes of NeshamaCast are available at neshamacast.simplecast.com and are typically posted 1 week after the episode first airs. Our theme music is a nigun for Ki Anu Amecha, written and performed by Reb Cantor Lisa Levine. Please help others find the show by rating and reviewing the show on Apple Podcasts. We welcome comments and suggestions for future programming at neshamacast@gmail.com. And be sure to follow NAJC on Facebook to learn more about Jewish spiritual care happening in our communities. May we all work together to heal our world. Mazel tov to fans of the Philadelphia Eagles on a resounding Super Bowl victory.